by a Greek historian living in the Roman Empire, but it's still one of our best sources for, probably our best source for Alexander. We don't have a lot of contemporary information. So there were contemporary accounts. He in fact had a historian traveling with him, but none of that ended up surviving. So we have to kind of rely on these primary sources, so to speak. All right, so any other questions about class stuff before we get started? Alexander the Great? No? All right, so we left off with the rise of Macedonia. What allowed Macedonia to gain power in the Greek mainland?
Wasn't it the Peloponnesian Wars?
Okay, what about the Peloponnesian Wars?
They kind of like, since they were in a conflict, they weakened each other to a degree.
Yes, that's a big part of it, right? Peloponnesian Wars really weakened kind of the main Greek city-states. And even though they kind of bounced back, they never bounced back 100%, but kind of the conflicts still go on and they continue to kind of get weaker and weaker, right? So that's going to open a door. What's the other thing? Kieran?
So could you say that both the Persian Wars and the Peloponnesian Wars left a power vacuum in Greece?
Yes. Although I think difference in who filled it, right? Because the Persian Wars, I don't know, I guess, I mean, certainly the Persian Wars opened the door for Athenian power, right? I don't know if quite power vacuum in the same way, but it certainly creates a new opportunity for Athens to kind of fill in a lot of gaps and increase its own power.
Yes, like the rule of Philip II kind of ushered in this.
What did Philip II do?
Created new military innovations, created the Corinthian League.
Right? So that was kind of his alliance, right, of Greek city-states. The military innovations, that's going to, again, he gets an open door because Greece is exhausted, the Greek city-states are exhausted, and he's bringing in military superiority, right? Cavalry tactics, new infantry, like hoplite tactics, new siege tactics. It's going to give him an advantage. All right, then he forms the Corinthian League. This is all the Greeks. We're going to stop fighting amongst each other. We're going to work together. What is kind of the name of the game, working together now, going forward, according to Philip and the Corinthian League? What's going to be the rallying cry? Panhellenism is back, right? It's about Greeks working together on the part of Greeks. And who is the enemy of the Greeks? Who are we going to take the fight back to? Persia, right? So, again, this language of reality is going to be kind of different, right? But the language of kind of, it's about Greek cooperating, supporting this kind of Greek identity, fighting against our traditional enemies, the Persians.
The silver mines of Athens, do they still have like reserves when Philip?
Yeah, I mean, they're starting to get used up, but I don't know exactly how dry they are. So it's not at their high point, but I don't know to what extent they might still be producing.
Do you think Philip could have used that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, if it was there, I'm sure he would have found a way to use it. I don't know what was there or if he used it or not. That's a good question. I can see if I find out. All right, so Corinthian League and Philip, right? Philip's going to lead the invasion. They drop their plans, but Philip gets assassinated before it can happen, opening the door for his 18-year-old son, King Alexander III of Macedonia, who will soon become known as Alexander the Great. All right, so as soon as Philip is dead, is like he's not even cold yet after being assassinated. There are all sorts of anti-Macedonian rumblings going on. Remember, a lot of the Greek city-states were not happy that Macedon has come in and kind of exerted control, right? Now the king has been killed. There's this young kid who's taken over for him. He's inexperienced, right? Maybe this is, time to get rid of the Macedonians, right? So Alexander quickly moves to consolidate power, right? Making sure that he can hold on to the territory that Philip gained, right? The call goes out to rise up against Macedonia, led by Thebes, right? So they're like, time to strike, fight back, freedom of the Greeks. The next two most powerful Greek city-states, Sparta and Athens, say no thank you. They take a pass. So Thebes kind of stands alone with some smaller allies and gets wiped out by Alexander and the Macedonian forces. So to kind of make a point, to show Macedonian power, Thebes gets leveled. At which point, they turn to Persia, right? Now that Greece is secure, 334, the Greek invasion, Macedonian invasion of the Persian Empire takes off under the command of Alexander. Okay, so they will make their way over Macedon, right, and then make their way into Asia Minor up there. So within 2 years, Alexander has taken control. He's conquered most of Asia Minor. Right, so back here, Asia Minor, modern Turkey. Okay, very important foreshadowing, right? Alexander's reign is he basically leaves in place kind of the Persian administrative structure. So one of the things we talked about, right, is to manage their empire, Persia had kind of divided it into districts. Each district had its own like regional governor or satrap, right? And this was a way of kind of better managing a big geographical area. So Alexander leaves the network in place, but replaces the satraps. He replaces the governors with people, more loyal figures. Again, the people that he replaces the satraps with are both Macedonian and Greek and Persian. So he's already starting to gain Persian support and rewarding his Persian supporters, oftentimes with plum administrative positions. Alexander announces that the Greek cities of Asia Minor, because again, if you remember, especially the coastal area here, this was heavily Greek, right? Greek cities, been Greek for a long, long time, right? The Greek cities of Asia Minor were now free. All right, so he announces the freedom of the Greeks from the oppressive regime of the Persians. However, because the war effort is going on, and wars are expensive, we're still going to need funding. So Alexander takes the tribute that they were paying the Persian king and basically has them keep paying it, now to him, retitling it as financial contributions to the war effort. So they're now free, but they're essentially kind of paying the same money just to a different person. Okay, questions here? All right, so after taking control of Asia Minor, right, big battle here, is this Alexander makes a right turn, heads down into Egypt, right? Which again, all of this territory, right? So the Levant, Egypt, this was all part of the Persian Empire, right? So he goes down into Egypt. Here again, another transformative moment. Alexander makes a pilgrimage to a famous oracle. So what's an oracle?
Temple.
Prophet? What makes a prophet a prophet, right?
A seer that speaks to the gods.
That speaks to the gods, right? And speaks with the voice of the gods, right? So can relate the gods' wishes. So there was a kind of popular oracle, right? That was in Egypt, in the desert of Siwa, and it was known as the Oracle of Zeus Amun. So Zeus, Greek god. Amun was an Egyptian god, right? An important Egyptian god. So initially it was kind of seen as a holy area to Amun, and kind of over time people are like, oh, Amun, Zeus, they're kind of the same person, right? So it was a shrine dedicated to this one god, Zeus Amun. So, according to stories that Alexander is going to encourage to be told about him afterwards, he walks in and he is greeted by the oracle. He is hailed as the son of Amun, right? The son of the god Amun. Apparently after this point, then, he says, well, look, the oracle acknowledged something. I'm the son of a god. So he starts to promote his, if not divinity, we'll say divine adjacency, right? That his father wasn't Philip, but maybe was the god. Now, this is something that kings in Egypt, Southwest Asia, right? Like Persia, right? they had this kind of a divine adjacency. This was nothing new. Greeks, however, including Greek kings like the Macedonians, didn't do this, right? There was a definite line between them and the gods. So the fact that kind of Alexander starts representing himself as being divine or divine adjacent, this really starts to upset many of his Macedonian soldiers and officers. They think he's not acting like a Greek, he's acting like a Persian, or acting like an Easterner, right? Here we have one of the coins that Alexander issues, right? On this side, we have a representation of Zeus Amun, that he was represented with having kind of this like ram's horn type thing, I guess, on the side of his head. On the other side, we have Alexander, his son, so to speak, right? And how does Alexander represent himself? What do you see up there?
The horn.
Right, similar type of ram's horn, right? So again, in coin form, representing himself as Zeus Amun, or at least as connected to Zeus Amun. He will also be crowned Pharaoh, king of Egypt, which was a title that the Persian king of kings, had previously held. Right.
Does this have any connection to Moses being traditionally depicted with horns in like early medieval and Renaissance art?
I have not heard of Moses depicted with horns.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Huh.
he usually sometimes.
No, I'm saying it's not something I really am knowledgeable about. So now I'm kind of curious. All right. So given the answer is I don't know, I will see what I can find out. Where's my paper? I'm gonna write this down. All right, we got Moses with horns. We've got silver ones. Okay. So we'll see. All right, so he's now crowned Pharaoh, right, of Egypt. Here we have, this is a mosaic found in Rome, so it's much later mosaic, right? But it is commemorating Alexander's big kind of victory over the Persian king Darius at Issus, right? Here we have Alexander on his horse, right? Soldiers. There's the Persian king Darius, right? Who is, at least in my opinion, starting to look kind of panicked, right? Because we see the Macedonian spears coming up behind him. All right. So after Alexander takes Egypt and starts kind of heading back, go back here, then turns back and starts heading back up into Asia proper. The Persian king Darius offers to surrender. He's like, okay, tell you what, why don't we be co-kings? You can rule the Western Empire, everything that you've conquered, Macedonia, Greece, Asia Minor, Egypt. I'll rule the East, we'll be partners. Moreover, you can marry my daughter. And this will kind of solidify things. All right? So again, he makes an offer, tries to compromise. Alexander's like, no. So he marches along, destroys a bunch of Persian cities, including one of their main capitals of Persepolis. So Alexander keeps advancing eastwards. Darius keeps losing and retreating. 330, Darius is going to be assassinated. So one of his satraps, right, is going to kill him and then declare himself to be the legitimate king of Persia. Here is where the narrative changes. Up until this point, the whole rhetoric has been Panhellenism, Greeks versus Persians, liberating the Greeks and the other peoples from the oppressive, kind of yoke of the Persians, right? So kind of very kind of traditional Pan-Hellenistic rhetoric. After Darius is assassinated, again, like I said, the tune changes. Alexander declares himself the successor of Darius, who he refers to as his father. Doesn't, I don't think, literally expect people to believe that Darius was his literal father, but still kind of his symbolic father, or perhaps adoptive father. Remember, Darius had offered to let Alexander marry his daughter, even though Alexander never did, right? So he starts referring to Darius as his father. He is his legitimate successor. This other guy is an evil usurper who had betrayed his rightful king, right? He vows to avenge Darius, right? And protect his legacy as king of Persia. It's the big turnaround, right? He's able to recover Darius' body. He celebrates kind of a full grand state funeral, right? With full honors, kind of honoring Darius. This, again, is obviously a calculated move. He is declaring himself to be, again, the legitimate king of the Persian Empire. And he is going to, because of his efforts here, going to win a great deal of Persian support, right? He's both winning, don't necessarily want to support the loser, right? But also, he's kind of seems willing to meet people halfway, right? That like, okay, it's no longer Greeks versus Persians. I'm now in charge of Asia, right? I'm now kind of the king of everything. Okay, questions here, questions. Sure.
So before this, was Alexander not as popular in Persia?
He had been growing. So from the very beginning, he's going to get some Persian support, right? But this is going to be kind of like a landslide. Like after this point, I mean, it's hard to quantify this because we don't quite have the sources, but he's going to have kind of most of the Persian support after this, right? Partly because, like I said, he's winning. People kind of recognize the writing on the wall. And then partly because like he's willing to play the game, right? That he no longer presents himself as an antagonist, but kind of like, you are my subjects now, right? Other questions? Oh yeah.
Why didn't he marry Darius's daughter? Was it because he was worried about, I don't know, Greek or Macedonian?
I don't think that for what happens next. Do you have, Jeremy, you have a thought?
How old was he again when this was occurring?
So he was 18 and I have to do the thing. He was 18 and 36, so that would be 24? Yeah, 24. Why? Don't know, right? Probably thought that it would like weaken his position, maybe. Because as we'll see in a second, he has no compunctions about marrying non-Greek, non-Macedonian people. All right, other questions? Everyone good? All right. Now, at this point, Macedonian troops, both kind of rank soldiers and officers, are getting increasingly unhappy. There are several reasons here, right? Some of which we've already mentioned, but are kind of getting more intense. One, right? Alexander keeps marching eastwards, conquering more land. The further east they go, the farther away from their home they get. So this is already starting to get, okay, like, enough's enough. After Alexander declares himself kind of king of Asia and successor of Darius, as part of this, he adopts Persian court rituals. In other words, basically, he starts presenting himself as an Asian or Persian king, and people in his presence are supposed to act like Persians did in front of their king. So what that means, a lot of bowing, a lot of scraping the floor, kind of on your stomach, right? Not raising your head, averting your eyes, blowing kisses, all this kind of stuff like that, which was part of Persian court ritual. Now, why do you think Alexander adopts this? What do you think, Brian?
To make his transition as leader more pleasing to his new subjects, that they would not feel as ready to try and rebel against him because they're like, oh, he's trying to blend with us, maybe we could woo him a little bit.
Right, yeah, right. So, like, this is what a king looks like to them. Alexander's acting like a king, seems willing to engage with them, right? There's positive outcome. For the Greeks and the Macedonians, however, right? This is like I said, kings are bad enough, right? The fact that Macedonia had a king, this was already kind of dodgy. But at least it was a Greek king or a Greekish king, right? They said none of these kind of Eastern Persian stuff. Now, right, Alexander's behaving in the manner that, if you wrote your essay on Panhellenism, right, you encountered this, right? That he's behaving in a way that was seen as kind of the opposite of what Greeks were supposed to be.
Similar to Mark Antony, right?
That can be, yes. Mark Antony is going to have similar things leveled against him, right? So people aren't happy, right? Again, keeps emphasizing his divine descent. More and more, he's leaning into the fact that he's the son of a god. Okay? Very interesting at this point. See who knows their mythology. He starts representing himself, again, as connected to, or kind of in the manner of Heracles / Hercules. Hercules is the Latin form, right? So here is Alexander. He's wearing the lion skin, right? This was kind of the traditional way that Heracles was represented. On the back of the coin says Alexander. So, Heracles was unique. He accomplished something that no other mortal ever accomplished in Greek mythology. Anyone know what Heracles accomplished?
Didn't he become a god?
He became a god. In Greek mythology, he was the only mortal, right? So like there were lots of Greek heroes that were like part god, part human, half god, demigods. They were still mortal. Heracles was the only one. He was a demigod, but because he was so awesome, like Heracles was like the awesome of the awesome. He was so awesome that he was made into a god. So perhaps what's the message here, right? For a Greek, this is not subtle, right? Who is this, what's kind of Alexander aspiring to, right? If not literal godhood, that he is a step above mere mortals. All right, then last thing he does is he gets married. So not to the daughter of Darius, I don't know if we know what happens to her, but he marries a Bactrian princess. So Bactria is roughly modern Afghanistan. It was part of the Persian Empire. It's up here, right? So part of the noble family of Bactria, right, that was under Persian control, right? He is going to marry a woman from that family by the name of Roxanne. Okay, so again, all of these things are making the Macedonians really, really unhappy. There's going to be several assassination attempts against Alexander coming from within his army. Alexander is going to survive them all, and he's going to institute a massive purge where anyone even suspected of disloyalty is going to be executed from his army. Okay? Difficult times between Alexander and his troops. Okay, questions here? No? All right. So this brings us now to our primary source for today. So we've got our primary source, right? PS 17, The Campaigns of Alexander, written by the historian Arrian, about 400 years after Alexander's death. And so this is a long kind of narrative of Alexander's campaigns. We're looking at two excerpts from it. So a long excerpt 1 and a kind of shorter excerpt 2. So what I'd like you to do is to take a few minutes to review the document, and we're going to talk about these questions up here, right? So let's take 10 minutes to review, and then we will discuss together. And if anyone has any questions about anything in the document, again, feel free to ask and I'll help out. Oh, and let me add too, as you think about these questions, mark down or take note of in the text evidence, right? Evidence from the text that can support your answers to these questions, right? So pay close attention to that.
Yes.
just a couple more minutes and we'll talk about these questions here. All right, so let's talk about Alexander. So, excerpt 1, we get a pair of speeches, right? So, where does Alexander deliver the speech? Where's the location?
Was it near the Hephaestus River,
So, where is that?
northern India?
Yeah. All right, so right, like here. All right, what do you notice here about the map? What does this kind of represent? He's giving the speech right here.
This river.
Yeah, it's kind of the end. It's going to be the ending point of his expansion, right? And this represents kind of the turning point moment, right? So Alexander gives the speech first. What's his argument? Or first off, I should say he's giving the speech to his officers, right? So what's his argument? Kieran.
That if they turn back now, all that they won and fought and died for will go away.
Okay. Jeremy?
He's like, I can understand if, like, you know, you fought all this time and, like, you didn't reap the rewards, but, like, I fought with you, so, you know, you're actually reaping the rewards of the fighting. And if we don't keep going, then we're going to be, like, in constant fear of like revolts and rebellions, territory being taken over.
Okay, so we've got lost opportunity, danger, right?
Why I would say, if all of the points that we made earlier, the fact that does read and you speak with officer about if you have any complaints towards him or any of your efforts that have made throughout the campaign, that then as I said in one passage, there's no more to say. Of course, as mentioned before, I think it does also make the argument in that that if you turn back now, everything, let's say all the work that has been done throughout the campaign will be lost, especially since you also lean towards like how much the accomplishments and are bigger than anything that has been done before, and even by the gods themselves, like Dionysius.
Okay. Andy?
The promises of wealth.
Okay, so there's future wealth,
Oh, picture.
right? Nicolette?
He promises, like a legendary status. Like
Okay.
he mentions that, nobody will forget them from history if they continue on this path to create it.
Okay, good. All right, so where is a good piece of evidence that supports any of these points here? Who's got a piece of evidence from the quote from the speech to share that supports, again, one of the points that people made? Christopher?
Right here in like page 3, where it says, you have made yourselves masters of the land beyond the Caspian Gates, beyond the Caucasus, beyond the Taranis, the Bactria, the Hyrcania, and the Hyrcanian Sea. We have driven the city and backed it into the desert. The end of the the ice and God.
It's okay, don't you?
And the hydra to flow through the country. With all that you accomplished, why do you hesitate to extend the power of Macedon, your power, to the high faces and the tribes on the other side?
Okay, so what is this evidence for?
To show that like he's trying to prove that like if we don't stop, that why should we stop now when this is like we've been doing so well? You're now masters of it. Why stop while we're ahead? Like
Okay.
something
All right, what's that now? Easy?
This is for the promises of wealth potentially. Then indeed, I will go further than the mere satisfaction of your ambitions.
What page you on?
What page is this? 5.
Okay.
Mere satisfaction of your ambitions, the utmost hopes of riches or power which each one of you cherishes will be far surpassed, and whomever wishes to return home will be allowed to go either with me or without me.
All right. So, utmost hopes of riches, right? Pretty much, there's the promise of riches right there, right? Here, really quickly, let's go back to Christopher's point, because we want to I want to finish something up, because I think you've got kind of half of it there, right? Where it's, yes, look at what you've all done before, but it's also kind of in service of another point that he's trying to make, right? So it's not just like, look at what you've done, glory, because what's the line that comes after that? This is page 3.
Are you
Are you afraid that a few natives who may still be left will offer opposition? Come, these natives either surrender without a blow or are caught on the run or leave their country undefended for your taking, and when we take it, we make a present of it to those who have joined us of their own free will. So what's he saying here? What's the argument for going forward? What's the argument?
I would say that the argument is that eventually that they'll win
Why will they win?
because they're stronger.
Right. Well, or more specifically,
Yeah.
the other guys are weaker.
Weaker.
Right? There's no opposition. So why does he list all of the things they've done so far right before this?
To show how far they've made it.
To show how far they've made it, sure. Christopher?
to, I guess, enlarge their egos, like
Okay, how does that enlarge their egos?
Where it's like Because they're saying like, you've done all this, and now you're afraid of these guys like over here.
There you go, right? You've done all these, conquered all of these peoples, all of these lands, and now you're afraid of a couple small guys on the other side, right? So we get that kind of both, they're gonna be a pushover, what are you afraid of, are you chicken type of argument going on. All right, Brian, do you have something?
I guess just to add to one of your points, guys, I think there also makes the argument, why would if they don't press forward, if they don't conquer these people, as it was mentioned in page 4 in the description of the other peoples, so that if we withdraw now, there's a danger that the territory which we do not disagree hold may be stirred to revolt by some nation or other we have not yet forced into submission. So that happens, all that we have done and suffered will prove fruitless. Or we shall be faced with the task of doing it over again from the beginning, gentlemen of Macedon. And you, my friend, and I, that this must not be.
Okay, so this is argument for, I think, the first point that Kieran made, or one of the arguments, right? If you don't keep going forward, everything you've done is for nothing. Again, why is it for nothing? Again, it's not quite glory here. In the example that Brian just read, why is it all for nothing?
If they neglect to take care of the other peoples, then they'll rise up in revolt and overthrow the worship.
Right. That if they don't make sure that everyone is completely defeated and completely subjugated, then once they leave, because they're far away, then the other peoples will rise up and take that, right? So they'll basically lose it unless they defeat all the people. All right, who's got more evidence to back up some of this stuff? Nicolette.
I have evidence to back up what I mentioned
Mhm.
about being honorable.
Okay, being honorable.
It actually is the next sentence after
Okay.
stand firm for well you know that hardship and danger are the price of glory, and that the sweet is the savior of a life of courage, and the deathlessness renowned beyond the grave.
Okay. So what's the argument that he's making here that's related to honor? Like when you say honor, there's kind of different elements of honor. What's he promising them here?
I would say he's promising them I want to say legendary status, almost like the gods.
There you go, right? Yeah, everyone's gonna remember you if you go do this awesome thing, right? So again, it's honor in the sense of you are being honored, right? You will leave a powerful legacy if you do this. All right, who else has evidence? There was one other claim that got made about, well, it's dangerous to turn back now. Not just for the lands, but for you. Right? Yeah.
Well, actually, I was about to say, might sound a little bit different.
Okay.
Because, could I also find this on page 4?
Okay, sure.
I think I also relate to the point meeting when it said online where it says where our ships will sail around from the Persian Gulf to Libya as far as the Pillars of Hercules. Once all Libya to the eastward will soon be ours, and all Asia too into this empire. There will be no boundary but what God Himself has made for the whole world.
Okay. So what's that mean?
Okay. Okay. How should I say this? I think in that line, Alexander's trying to make the point, saying how not just they are not just conquering on land, but also about the seas as well. So the ships, as you mentioned, sail around the Persian Gulf all the way to Libya, to as far as the Pillars of Hercules, and that there will be no boundaries. But what God Himself had made for the whole world, and God to enlarge the empire.
So we call this one the Christopher Columbus argument. That, well, we've almost reached the end, and the ocean's going to be right there. So one, that's awesome. There's fame and stuff. Then instead of having this hard overland trip back, where there might be disgruntled people, we'll just sail around back home again, right? So keep going, and we'll have an easier path back home. Because the oceans are all connected, and you'll see this in a little bit. Again, has no idea how big Asia is, right? But that's kind of the argument there. All right. Anything else? I think that's all I have. Okay. So, anyone else have something about Alexander's arguments or kind of his justifications here about why they should keep going further? Okay, so no one wants to respond to Alexander at first. A little nervous. Once again, Alexander has not had a good track record with people who are disagreeing with him recently. He's been seeing lots of traitors nearby. But one officer, Coenus, stands up and gives his response. So, what's Coenus' argument?
They're tired.
We're tired. That sums it up, right?
I,
We summed it up, we want to go home, right? I think there's lots of good evidence of that, right? And he pitches Alexander kind of an alternative, right? What's kind of the alternative?
I guess to go back and do it again in a couple of years.
Yeah, it's like go back, get new troops, fresh troops. They're young, they don't know any better, right? They're eager for glory. Then go out and finish conquering the world. Okay. That one I think is probably good, right? They're like, we're rich, we're ready to go home, let's see our wives. Then we get the great ending. Coenus' words were greeted with applause. Some even wept, which was proof enough of their reluctance to prolong the campaign and of how happy they would be should the order be given to turn back, which eventually it will be. Eventually they do. Alexander resented the freedom with which Coenus had spoken and the poor spirit shown by the other officers and dismissed the conference. So how does Alexander end up at the end of this whole episode? Jordan?
He's very upset that no one else wants to do all the crazy shit that he wants to do.
That's pretty much it, right? Right? And again, resented, I think this is a telling line, the freedom with which Coenus had spoken, right? That's something that a Greek citizen would say, going up challenging ideas. That's not something you would say to your king, right? Now again, whether this is true or not, who knows, right? Once again, 400 years later. But the image is, again, an increasingly autocratic Alexander, right?
His original soldiers were, I think they were depleted.
Right. Well, part of the argument too. There's basically none of there's very few people left from who originally set out from right. We've left behind wounded. We've had to settle people to garrison cities. There's no one left. Like we want to go home. Absolutely.
So at this point, like the majority of Alexander's army were just like people from the lands he's conquered.
I mean, probably. I mean, again, we don't have a great way to verify it, but probably. Like he's basically kind of taken over all of the Persian armies and stuff. So yeah. As we'll kind of see in the next excerpt.
So would they be considered auxiliary soldiers?
No.
No.
Not anymore, really. Well, I guess it would depend on who you asked. I don't know if there was official designation or not. Like if you asked a Macedonian general, they might say yes. If you asked a Persian general, they might say no. Nicolette?
This when they have Greek fire?
No. Later. Although we're getting closer, I guess, not the first documented account, but supposedly Archimedes develops it, when's Archimedes? Maybe within a few decades. But it's not actually verified usage until Middle Ages. Byzantines, the other Greeks. Jordan?
Is there an English word for like the process when someone takes over a certain place and converts to that specific culture instead of the other way around? Like whenever people take over China, they become Chinese. Like they don't even.
There's something, yeah.
Assimilate, no?
Yeah.
No, but there's like a specific, like in Chinese, the word like it's like Han Hua, it's like the process of when a foreigner takes over China and they convert to Chinese culture instead of trying to convert Chinese people to their culture. It's something about representing the power dynamic, right? I think what Jordan is asking, because the assimilate is usually used someone with lesser power, kind of adopting the culture of someone with greater power, like we see in empires. And I think what Jordan is asking is people with greater power who are adopting the customs of theoretically someone with lesser power. Right?
Wasn't it also what happened throughout the history of ancient Egypt from the Macedonians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Persians, hoplites, not the hoplites, the people from Venezuela, they were all king as pharaohs. They all adopted Egyptian culture to a certain extent. Sort of like Egypt sort of consumed them or like conquered it.
Right. And to a certain extent, right, we can see that like that's not a full assimilation, right? That they're adopting some elements of Egyptian culture, rejecting others, right? Blending some things with their culture, So in a lot of ways, what it speaks to, so once we kind of put aside the kind of power relationship thing, right, which is its own kind of ball of wax, right, is that it's going to be kind of the story that we're talking about the Hellenistic era here, where we've got kind of a veneer, a surface level culture, but there's all sorts of things going underneath it where cultures are mixing and changing and ideas are being kind of incorporated or changed, right? So that's kind of what's happening. That's what's going to happen in the Hellenistic era, and I think that's what's kind of happening here, right? So I mean, Alexander is adopting the Persian customs largely because he finds them beneficial, right? What that means in terms of like what he actually believed or what he thought or we don't know, right? In terms of how did he view himself as Persian? Did he view himself as Macedonian? Did he view himself as unique? That information is kind of missing for us. All right, so let's go on here. Excerpt 2, right? The army's turned back, right? Alexander is going to, and we'll talk a little bit more about this event in a second, right? But he's going to introduce some military changes here, or some additions, right? So what are the kind of military changes or additions that he implements at Susa in Excerpt 2?
Inheritors,
Who are the inheritors?
these 30,000 troops that he brought along with him.
Sort of, that he brought, so he brought them to kind of Susa, right? But where are they from, kind of Persia, Asian, right? But how are they dressed?
In Persian garb, right?
Nope.
No, they're
Greek.
dressed in Macedonian.
Right.
Macedonian armor.
So he's got a bunch of Persian or Asian people, right, who have been trained in the Macedonian style of fighting with the phalanx, dressed in Macedonian armor, right? And he called them his inheritors. Now again, what does this kind of signify to Macedonians? It causes bad feelings, Arian says.
Would it also be his generals too, who inherit his kingdom?
Well, that's later. These are different inheritors. These are kind of the inheritors of his, or the Macedonian military tradition. But why is this upsetting to the Macedonians?
I guess because it's showing that Alexander's becoming like Orientalist in a sense, and that he's almost he's more reliant now on the Persians than he is on
Okay.
the Greeks.
It's very true. I might push back on he's becoming an Oriental because he's adopting kind of the Asian customs in other contexts. Here it's a little bit different though, right?
Yeah.
Nicolette?
I can assume that they would be upset because he is catering to who he captured
Okay.
instead of like the traditional Macedonian way of making them into a non-citizen.
I mean, again, I'm going to push back because kind of what's implied here is that there has been traditional training and traditional dress, that he has at least gestured to Macedonian military traditions, right? This is the whole point, is that they've been trained in the Macedonian style of fighting, they're wearing the Macedonian style of armor, they're going to fight in the phalanx in this superior, right, objectively superior in many respects, Macedonian way. So what's the problem here? What?
They think that he's abandoned his own people or their own culture for the culture of the people that he conquered.
But he hasn't abandoned the culture, right? Macedonian training, Macedonian dress. At first, here at the first part.
It's kind of like it's almost like a feeling of like, well, we're not going home. He's just going to replace with Persian soldiers, basically. Like he's not returning home to get more soldiers from home. He's just like replacing what he already has.
Well, but also he's replacing us.
Yeah.
right? That, you know, the whole thing kicks off as, you know, Greeks versus Persians, and this is about reclaiming kind of the superiority of the Greeks over the Persians, right? And now he's basically replacing, I mean, as literal as you can be, right? Replacing Macedonians with Persians, right? And as Arian writes here, right, it was an indication of his many efforts to lessen his dependence for the future on his own countrymen. He doesn't need the Macedonians anymore, right? What else does he do? Besides this. He does something else with kind of Asian troops, Persian troops.
Creates like new generals,
Okay.
like superior generals, I could assume.
Or if not superior, at least part of the superior group, right? So again, it's that he's removing Macedonian exclusivity. Persians, Asians have been involved for a while, but there were still kind of elite, you know, kind of troops, right? Elite, you know, we might say, I guess, what, battalions, right? The elite generals, like the cream of the crop, were still Macedonian, but now that kind of exclusivity is starting to crumble, right? He's bringing in Asians into the elite ranks.
And speaking of the elite ranks, is it also true, that, and I think you could say there's also mentioned on page 8, as Alexander was also trying to form a new regiment of sorts with Persians. And the line that I'm referring to is on page 8, where it says, besides this, a fifth mounted regiment was formed and did not consist entirely of Oriental troops, but the total cavalry strength was increased, and a certain number of foreign troops were posted to it. Foreign officers were also posted to a special squadron. Kofi, his son Artabazes, Uranus, and Archibaldus, his son of Mazius, Synesis, and Pharamenes, son of Paracles, the satrap of Parsania, Synesis, son of Oxiades, and the brother of Alexander's wife, Roxanine.
Okay. So here we think everyone's like, well, they turn against him because again he is, well, it says here, right, because of his own, that he's being tainted with Orientalism. And I kept pushing back and saying, but no, right? He's, you know, it's all about how they're fighting in the Macedonian way. Like, he's not rejecting Macedonian customs or styles of fighting or dress or anything like that, right? What's breaking down is the exclusivity. Right? But you are right. I mean, this, the way that it ends, right? It does talk about him being tainted. So how is he being tainted then? Like, how is he turning his back on his culture if he is perpetuating his culture? What's he actually turning his back on, so to speak? And this I'll give you a hint. This ties in with the idea of Pan-Hellenism. What's he turning his back on? Jordan?
He's turning his back on like Macedonians themselves.
Okay.
Elevating so many other people and kind of gradually getting them out of the elite in his society.
Right. Okay. So that's like the big part of it. And so, what does that kind of mean in terms of Macedonian, Greek, Pan-Hellenic culture?
It could mean that since a good army could be that since that Alexander is sort of ending the exclusivity of Macedonians, and as he adding more Persians into the mix, could that mean that the mission of spreading Pan-Hellenism and the spreading of Greek culture might as well be coming to an end?
In a way, right? But like I said, we've got kind of a paradox. He's literally spreading Greek culture by training people in like Greek military tactics, right? But he's also, according to Arian and according to the soldiers, turning his back on Greek culture. And so we're trying to kind of reconcile these two. And Jordan hit something. Well, a big part of it is that he's replacing the Macedonians or getting rid of the Macedonians, which is true. How does that represent almost a turning your back on Macedonian or pan-Hellenic culture, right?
I think it's because, much like the soldier said in his big speech, Alexander, Macedonians have followed him since the beginning, and yet not many are left.
Okay.
Especially in the ranks. So for him to leave them behind, not just physically, but also metaphorically, in representation of the new government, they kind of feel like he's kind of, they're getting like the short end of the stick.
Okay, I mean, very true, very true. But there's still another big piece we're missing. Nicolette?
How, in the future, how would they be able to tell who's Greek and who's Persian?
Okay, that's right. And what's a key component of the pan-Hellenic identity?
Your heritage.
Your heritage?
I guess the idea that Greeks are superior to barbarians.
There you go, right?
Oh.
That it's not just that we dress different. It's not just that, we fight using different styles, right? But again, a core part of the pan-Hellenic identity was this idea of superiority, right? Of superior, character, so to speak, right? And so what is Alexander turning his back on here, right? I mean, so everything you said is all absolutely correct, right? About turning his back on Macedonians, replacing them, but it's also kind of turning his back on this idea of, again, what was at the core of Pan-Hellenism? That Greeks were different than other peoples, and along with that, better than other peoples, right? And that is, not being held up by Alexander's actions. Yeah, Brian?
Isn't it true that a lot of the tribal peoples in Afghanistan often have certain features because they're descended in part from Alexander's army or like remnants of his army?
I can't speak to kind of modern, I don't know enough about kind of modern, but I mean, certainly there was a large Macedonian presence in what's Bactria, which is now modern Afghanistan, and that will continue for centuries after Alexander. And it will be a very, very multicultural area, right? So it seems very likely, I would say, that there are people who are descendants of, Macedonians who are still living in Afghanistan today. But I can't quite speak to. I don't know enough about genetic markers or how anything like that. But certainly, that area will remain. There will be a heavy Macedonian presence there, heavy Greek presence there for a long time. Okay, let me go on for a little. I'm almost out of time, so I want to do a little bit more really fast here. So good, right? Okay, right. 327. Alexander reaches the Indus River, right? Crosses the Indus River. He marches around for a little bit, gets involved in some local conflicts. Doesn't really do much. We get our speeches. Army refuses to advance any further. Alexander turns and goes back home. Okay, so 324 on kind of the march backwards, or march back westwards, we're going to get an important event at Susa, and this is what Excerpt 2 was speaking to. This is an event that Alexander deems the unification of mankind. To celebrate this event, first, Alexander takes 2 new Persian wives, right? So now 3 wives, right? Actually, let me start with this. Why is this particularly perhaps upsetting to Macedonians? There we go, right? Greeks were strict monogamists, at least in terms of marriage, right? So Alexander could have lots of girlfriends. That wasn't a problem to the Greeks, right?
Only one wife.
3 wives, right? And 1 wife. But 3 wives, that's not Greek, right? 90 of his officers marry Persian wives. Oftentimes, again, this will be the second wife for them. And he gives gifts to 10,000 of his soldiers who are already married to Persians, right? We get his successors or his inheritors, right, which we just read about in Excerpt 2. Coupled with this, which we didn't read about, is that he's also then going to discharge his veterans, so literally replace them, and the army's going to mutiny against him again. Okay, why does Alexander call this event the unification of mankind? What does it represent, Brian?
Because for a long time in the known ancient world, Persia and Greece were the 2 big superpowers who were mortal enemies. So for them to finally come together in both politics and blood, it would represent a new sort of what would have been thought of as globalism in the ancient world.
Very true. But go even more literal than that. So you're absolutely right, but it goes even one step more literal. Christopher? And it relates to what we were just talking about.
Like literally, like this is in terms of like how much we saw the world. It went from like the Balkans to like
Okay.
India. So like when he says that, he means like he just like conquered the world at this point. What you know?
Well, this is a little bit different than conquering the world. He's unifying mankind, right? He's already conquered the land. Now he's unifying mankind. And here's some of the things that he's doing. Jeremy?
I guess maybe like unifying like the civilized world with like the Aryans.
Aha! Right? And who's the civilized world?
The Greek Macedonians.
Greeks / Macedonians, right? Barbarians / Persians / Asians / Easterners,
Yes.
right? Again, two groups of people, more or less, right? In generally speaking. Think about Panhellenism, right? So much of this is defined as, we're different, from the Asians, different from the Persians, right? We are different peoples, not just in language, not just in dress, right? But different in our natures. Alexander is unifying mankind, right? Humankind. Right, Brian?
It could also be because of how Alexander governs the entirety of his empire. Because as mentioned before, Alexander also helped develop this system of governance throughout each of these territories. Which allows him to indirectly rule while gaining these people, as one might say, more autonomy.
I mean, that's true, but this is something different. It's related, but it's something different, something more literal.
He intends for like the next generation of people to be Greek and Persian because of all these marriages and stuff.
So are there going to be two peoples anymore, Greeks and barbarians?
No, just one.
There's just going to be one peoples now, right? Humankind has been unified and brought together, right? As represented again by the marriages and things like that, right? Greek and Easterner have come together, and now there will only be one. Right.
How does he know who will be his successor if he has multiple wives? Like, how is that determined? And also, if you have multiple Persian wives, does that mean, yeah, this is all nice that everyone's gonna be united, but like, I'm sure the people back in Macedonia are gonna be like, oh, so like, we're gonna be ruled by a half Persian, half-breed, basically.
Those are excellent questions. We're never going to get to learn how Alexander might have perhaps solved them.
Nope.
Because Alexander is going to come to a quick end. So we're going to have to wait till next week. But those are excellent questions, but will not